Hello class, this is Mr. Broussard, and I'm sending this video for the fifth week of our Composition 2 course for the fall of, let me do this, hold on, for the fall of 2020. Sorry, my YouTube thing here is acting a little wonky, so hopefully you actually get to see this. I just want to let you know what it is that we are doing for this week. It's a rather big week because it's one of two things that are happening. One, we're moving from short stories, as far as what we're reading, from short stories to poetry. But even more important is this is the week in which you will have your first essay that is due. So I wanted to make sure you're aware of that and what it is you need to do and when you need to do it and how you need to do it. So first things first. Let me make sure. First things first, the thing that you're probably most concerned and wanting to know about, and that is the short fiction essay. Now, let me be abundantly clear about what it is you will be writing about. Well, by first saying what I do not want in this essay. You're not writing me a short story. Do not write me a short story. I repeat, do not write me a short story. If you write me a short story, it's a zero. So let me be abundantly clear on that. What you are doing is you are bringing out 3 points of critical analysis from one or multiple of the works that we have covered in these first 3 weeks. And you are then discussing them similar to what you've done in your reader response. And by the way, you've done a very good job on the reader responses. So if you're doing a really good job on your reader responses, continue doing that work on your future reader responses. But also, note that you will have to have 3 of those points of analysis instead of 1 when you are dealing with your essay. Now, here's the good news. You can take one of the 3 reader responses that you've already done, take that point of analysis, edit in a way to where it actually blends with an essay. Don't just copy and paste it, and if it doesn't blend, that's going to throw your reader off. But you can bring up the 1 point of analysis you've already brought up in a reader response, then add 2 new points of analysis that you would like to discuss, and merge it into 1 3 points of analysis essay. And in a way, you will have a thesis paragraph that you should have already learned about in Comp 1, a concluding paragraph that you should have already learned about in Comp 1, actually beginning if you took that. And your 3 body paragraphs each should deal with one of those points of analysis. You can't have more than that as far as your body paragraph is concerned. If you need more than 1 paragraph to bring out fully a point of analysis, go ahead and do that. The minimum is 5 total paragraphs. The minimum is 1,000 words. Those are both the minimums. You can always write more if you would like. You can go longer if it has a reason to be longer. Don't just write long, which some people do because you think it makes yourself sound smarter, or because you think that if you write a long enough essay that I won't actually read the thing. Great, I'll just throw a grade on there. Nope, I'm paid to read the whole thing. And if it goes long, but for a good reason, that will help you. If it goes long because I can tell you're trying to throw everything in there for one of the reasons I've already mentioned, it will go bad for you because you can have loads of needless fluff in there. You can have circular writing, which is basically where you say the same thing over and over again, but in a different way. You have a whole bunch of randomness in there. It's not going to help you. If it's long for a good quality reason, because you need to go in such detail about the analysis that you're doing, that's great. It won't hurt you. In fact, it'll look better on you. But if you're going long for any of the reasons I noted prior, it will hurt you. But the 1,000 words is the minimum, and the 5 paragraphs is the minimum. The 3 points of analysis is a minimum. If you'd like to have more than 3 points of analysis, that's fine. 3 is the minimum as far as that. Now, you can take that one of 2 ways. You can either have 3 different points of analysis, or, if you'd like to do this other way, the same point of analysis, but in 3 different works. That is also fine. You can have that as well. As long as you do one or the other, that is fine. And it must deal with one or multiple of the works that we covered. Note that we covered. If you pull out a random work, whether it's from the textbook or not, that is not from the first 3 weeks of this course, you earn a 0. Do not add that. In fact, if it's from outside the textbook and you don't properly source it, it's a plagiarism 0 because technically you've added things in that you're not supposed to be adding. From an outside source. Inside source being the textbook, it'll be 0, but it won't be a plagiarism 0, an active category violation, but you'll still earn a 0. You must write every part of this essay must deal with either the things that carry by Tim O'Brien, John Steinbeck's The Chrysanthemums, Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32, otherwise known as the Parable of the Prodigal Son. Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. A Good Man of Heart is Hard to Find, or Revelation by Flannery O'Connor. Rose Brimley, Boeing Faulkner, or Everyday Use by Alice Walker, or Everyday Use by Alice Walker. That's all you can write about. And it'll be like before. You bring up the point of analysis, you back up the point of analysis with the part of the literature that backs up that point of analysis, but you don't just give me a straight summary. Now, again, I don't think that's going to be an issue because I haven't really had an issue with that. Those of you who actually have turned in reader responses have gotten this thing right on, and that makes me very, very happy because that makes me think you're going to do that on the essay. Pretty much what I've learned is that half of the class does it exactly on, and the other half didn't do any work at all, and that's why half of our class is gone now. Because if you don't do a certain amount of work by a certain amount of time, you get booted out of the system. So who is left in this course is doing really, really well, and you should feel really good. And if you keep that high quality work, you're going to continue to do well on your essays and throughout this class. So keep up the good work. Don't lack off, don't slack off. This in particular is a class where students will sometimes slack off near the end. So I'm going to reiterate this once we get closer to the end of the semester. Well, I will also say I had that issue in the fall, but I really had that issue in the spring, because it's one thing when you're in a class and it's going along, but it's not as nice out. It's another thing, it's from winter to spring and it's getting nicer out. And then I start having students that try to half-ass at the end, and unfortunately the grade reflects that. So I don't have that much of an issue with a fall course, but in the spring I do. So be mindful of that, and I'll bring that up again as we go later in the semester. So make sure you have that essay. And what I'm going to decide to do, because I think I have it due Monday morning at 2:59. I think I'm going to give you an extra 24 hours. So I'm going to go ahead, and instead of having it due early Monday morning, it's going to be insanely early Tuesday morning, October the 27th at 2:59 a.m. So I will give you the extra 24 hours there. And that's in case any of you have any questions for me on Monday. I would hope you wouldn't wait till the last minute, but you never know. But if you have any last minute questions, you can ask me on Monday and I can answer whatever needs to be answered on Monday. But then what you need to do is make sure you have this essay turned in no later than before you go to bed Monday night. You have technically until 2:59 a.m. the next morning, but I've had too many students lie to themselves, telling themselves, hey, I have all day Tuesday to get this done. And I've even had a few students that didn't realize that AM and morning, and that made me wonder how the hell you got into college, but it happens. My thinking on that is I'm hoping that those type of students are just hardcore partiers who see 2:59 a.m. and still think of it as the night before. That's what I'm hoping. But you can never tell. So that is what you need to do. And again, the short fiction essay, which is a short fiction analysis essay. It is not a short fiction writing. A short fiction analysis essay, taking off what you've already done with the read responses, will be due, let's just say, Monday night. 1,000 words, at least 1,000 words, at least 5 paragraphs. So make sure you get that done. Now, other written works that you will have. You do have a journal this week. That will be due, let's just say, Tuesday night. And the theme topic for the journal is endurance. So make sure you take the broad topic of endurance and then narrow your focus down. That very same day, you will have a reader response with all the same parameters as before. Again, let's just say Tuesday night, get both those done. And that reader response will deal with this week's literature. And this week is the first week in which we will be getting into poetry. So it's a completely different style of writing, obviously. Now, some of you will get happy about this. Why? Well, less reading. It is the least amount of reading you're going to do. It's less reading than the short stories you've already done. It's way less reading than the drama plays you will be doing. So there's something nice about that, right? You have more of them, but even having a bunch of poems. I mean, this week you've got Theodore Rothke's My Papa's Waltz, Wee Butler Yeats When You're Old, Dudley Reynolds' Ballad of Birmingham, Daystar by Rita Dove, and Those Winter Sundays by Thomas Hayden. So there's 5 poems, but they're poems. I don't remember that long. So you're like, oh, great. All less reading to do. That is true. The thing about poetry is that means when you're writing about poetry, that means a lot more of what you would write about poetry is on you to find it out, to figure out. You don't have the massive expanse of words that you would in a short story or even bigger one in drama plays, to where it's a lot easier for you to find things. When it comes to poetry, you have to delve in. And in particular with poetry, isn't just the words themselves that have meaning. It's the flow of the words. It's the rhyme scheme in which the words are in. It's how many lines are within a stanza. It's when certain breaks are within stanzas or between stanzas and how those things read out. Punctuation marks and how they are played within the poems themselves. These are all areas in which you have to have a focus in, and these are all areas in which you can write about. Tell you right now, I had 3 poetry explications in graduate school, and so I had to take a 20-line poem and live action in 3 hours, write as much about that 20-line poem as possible, dealing with all these areas. And I wrote for 3 hours and wrote 7.5 pages, handwritten, unfortunately, about those 3 poems. First time I did it, I got a C. Second time I did, I got a B. And the third time I got an A. Because you need to have that understanding of what all you need to write about. And again, with poetry, it isn't just the words on the page that have meaning, although they do. And they have certain, you'll still have the some symbolism that'll be a part of the poem and what certain things are representing, individual entities within it are representing. You will still have certain thematic importance that you will see in that poem and what is the poem all about. Certain motifs that you see common within poetry or within all forms of literature that you must delve into and look into. And by the way, the great thing about poetry and the great thing about all literature, you might actually disagree on what these things mean. That's perfectly fine. When I physically teach these courses, I have students and I try to have you come up with your own thoughts and ideas instead of regurgitating my own. And they will sometimes have ideas that aren't the same. Sometimes they're contradictory. And yet they can argue about it, not argue, and an argument as far as equality discussion, not yelling, screaming, flinging poo at each other, which is what most people think of arguments now. But they'll have a discussion and it will be either completely different or completely antagonistic to each other. And yet they can both make quality arguments through the text. And that's what you should be able to do as well through the written form of your text. They do that in written as well. But I like for them in the physical classroom to understand that you can make these arguments in class and then make these arguments in your writing. And they can be contradictory and yet correct. You can contradict what I think it is and still be correct as long as you back it up with the text, with the literature itself, with the poem itself, poetry itself. In fact, I take great pride if a student has a completely different opinion than I do, contradictory opinion, and yet can discuss and back it up, that's great. Even better than that, if they have an opinion that I didn't even think about, seems off the wall, but they can back it up. I think that's the best because, as I've said before, if I can just get you thinking, if I can thinking for yourself, I want to make you think whether you like it or not. I will say it in every single class until the day I retire. I want to make you think whether you like it or not, and that I see that you're thinking on your own, and I can tell that through your reader responses, and I'm already very happy about those. And so if we can continue this with the poetry, that'd be great. But I also understand some of you may be having reservations because it is a different type of poetry, different type of literature, and because, yes, it is more on you to figure these things out. So yes, symbolism, thematic importance, and motif is still important, but also as important when it comes to poetry. How many lines are in a stanza? The rhyme schemes of each stanza. The certain sounds that are consistent throughout the poems themselves, and how that plays to the overall thematic atmospheric elements of the poem. You have a feeling and a sense of what's going on in the poetry, just how the whole overall feeling is of what's going on within the poem itself. And what a lot of these things are called, if you have a certain consistent amount of lines in multiple stanzas, what are these things called? And knowing what these terms are. These are all in your text. I can go over a few of them right now. A couplet is a two-line stanza. Sestet is 6 lines. Quatrain is 4 lines. Octave is 8. And so on and so on, just basically, and to be able to discuss these things and to write about them. In fact, while it is not mandatory on the reader response, so if you'd like to bring this up in the response, is fine. It will be mandatory when we do get to this essay. Now, let me repeat, that's not the essay that's due next week, but the essay when we deal with poetry, one of the 3 points of analysis you will be mandated to bring up, it's the only time I mandate anything as far as that, is what we call the mathematical component. And within poetry, and some of you are like, crap, I took an English class because I hate math. Well, there's math everywhere. And yes, in literature, but mainly in poetry, because the mathematical elements of rhyme scheme, ABBA, meaning the out, you have a stanza, a quatrain stanza, the two outside lines rhyme, the two inside lines rhyme. That's ABBA, or ABBA, CDDC. Sometimes it's back to back, AABB, CCDD, EEFF, something like that. And that's something that you would mention in your essay, and could, if you wanted to, in your reader response. There's certain importance, if you have a 14-line poem, those are called sonnets. And there's certain forms, and this will deal more with next week's poems, I do believe, in this week's. Yeah, next week you'll deal with these type of poems, and I'll go in more detail next week. But it's 14-line poem, and how it's structured may determine if it's Shakespearean or Petrarchan, which is English or Italian sonnets. Again, not this week, but next week you'll deal with that. Whether a line, how many syllables are in a line, whether they're exactly the same or close enough, and what that plays within the poem as far as atmosphere, as far as rhythm. What if you have a line that has 10 syllables? A metered foot, just so you know, is 2 syllables. So if you have 5 metered feet or 10 syllables, that's something called iambic pentameter. And whether that plays into whether it just exists once or occasionally, or it's consistent throughout a poem or sonnet, and what that has to play when it comes to what you're producing within what you're writing about. These are all areas in which you can delve in. Some people are like, yeah, I'm getting weirdly excited because this is an area I love to delve into. It's the area when I'm live in class, I delve into. I love this stuff, and my students are usually looking at like this little tool. But I really do get into this type of stuff because I find it fascinating that you can say so little and say so much, and how you're able to do that is fascinating to me. So this is the area in which I get more excited than normal, and probably discuss more than normal, both in the class and when I do videos like this. So hopefully I didn't just scare you with that excitement, or that you feel like, oh God, he's going to be even more. I understand, many of you are completely new to this. Many of you have never dealt with this type of stuff before, because high schools didn't emphasize this thing. It's too ethereal. It's too out there in the tidy land of education, I guess you would say. They just want you to know what a noun or a verb is, and I understand that, unfortunately, as well. But hopefully some of you will get as excited about this as I do, and hopefully you will enjoy the poems that I have chosen for these next 3 weeks. Again, you'll have another 3 weeks in which we'll be dealing with poetry. We have a certain amount for this week, next week, and then the following week. This week is dealing with some basic stuff. Next week we delve more into more involved stuff, treating different stuff, including dealing with sonnets. And then, the third of those 3 weeks will be all poetry of one poet, Langston Hughes, and learning about him and how his personal life and what he was writing about and how it all worked in concert together. So that's what we'll be doing as far as the reading parts of the next 3 weeks. And you'll have reader responses that will, deal with that. And again, you'll get to choose the topic of the reader responses. If you'd like to choose a mathematical opponent as one of your reader responses, you can do so, but you'll have more to go into detail with. It's not mandatory in the reader responses, but it will be mandatory at least one of your 3-point analysis when we get to the poetry analysis essay. One of the 3 must be that mathematical component that I just discussed. So make sure you do that and get all the reading done that needs to be done. So as far as this week is concerned, read the poetry assigned for this week, October the 19th, week 5. You will have a journal and a reader response dealing with one of those poems, but you do also have the at least 1,000-word, at least 5-paragraph essay dealing with one or multiple of the works we covered in the short story portion of this class, and you'll have at least 3 points of critical analysis that you will bring up in that essay that must have at least 5 paragraphs and at least 1,000 words. You can use one of the points of analysis that you've already brought up in a reader response and then merge them into 2 others. Make sure it's still structured to where it all works in concert. Don't just fling it in there as a cut and paste, copy and paste. And then that essay will be due, let's just say Monday night, whereas your journal and your reader response will be due Tuesday night. That is it as far as today's video. I hope you're all doing well, and I will send another video next week.